that's the challenge because, as we look forward on, what new things are going to happen, it's always been a question of taking the complexity of the IT or the network out of the business side or the media side. And yet there's so many things changing so quickly, and the rate of change that happens so that new models become obvious that weren't there before. I mean, I talked, and if you were in the earlier session about net neutrality and talking about Netflix and Comcast, or, Netflix had a business where they were mailing things. All of a sudden now they're, depending on, the content providers and, other companies trying to push it down to the consumer through pipes that probably weren't designed for that. So it's going to take a lot of flexibility and a lot of, I guess, planning ahead. So I would ask, is it more bandwidth? Is it something that your equipment providers need to work on? I mean, what is the key thing, or a couple of key things that you think are going to happen over the next 2 years that are going to change these models on how this works?
I think there's going to be a growing amount of a partnership between the content owner, who actually owns that product, who owns the rights, who owns the venue, like this venue here, and the people that own the eyeballs. None of us here own any of the content, own any of the eyeballs. Right. And so we can do this great seamless job of taking it from where that content starts, right, and gets it to that egress point. But unless we have a great partnership with whoever is producing the content, and the Olympics example is we created a great partnership with those people, and many in the room do, and all the examples here. But that's the way it became successful. But at the end of the day, the panel that preceded us was net neutrality, and how does it go through, so you could get it onto the egress point, mm-hmm, and nobody is able to get the signal, and you got you got 20,000 iPads that when you first designed your system weren't in the model. And what's the plan? How do you get it to that data center? That data center, is it part of your model? So now you have to have more of a partnership with that data center. And then you have the other things where, Netflix, Google, the host of them are building their own infrastructures. Mm-hmm. And so how do you work with them? It's a constantly changing model, and the only way that you can ever stay ahead of it or stay up with it is just constantly coming to sessions like this and working with those other people that are building infrastructures and tying into them, staying ahead of the Comcast rate regulation, or whatever you want to, speed regulation issues.
I tend to agree with Wes on the fact that partnerships are absolutely essential for let's say, for things to work. And I had, let's say, 2 comments. I mean, we've talked about video, and we've talked about enterprise, et cetera. But one of the things we haven't talked about are things like massively parallel, real-time role-playing games, right? Mm-hmm. Where people just expect, again, similar to the video or similar to streaming, that things just work. I mean, you cannot be playing a real-time game against somebody else on the other side of the planet, and things happen so late that you're behind, let's say the wheel in the process, and that's something that we need to learn how to do. Mm-hmm. But a lot of these companies that are generating content, they come from a generation where they assume, again, that the internet or whatever it is, or the infrastructure exists, and by the way, that infrastructure is free. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a big, and it's a huge problem. If you talk to, let's say, some of the engineers and very large content providers, these are people that look at the internet level and then they go up. Mm-hmm. They're creating apps, right? They're creating tools. They're creating the infrastructure for the YouTubes. And their assumption is that A, fiber is there, B, doesn't cost anything, right, and 3, why should they pay for it if everyone wants to use their brand, right? And that's part of the problem that, let's say, that we're seeing, that some of these organizations need to come to grips with the fact that, yeah, maybe 10 years ago we overbuilt, right? But now we don't have that infrastructure, and it costs a lot of money to develop, it costs a lot of money to build, and somehow you have to share let's say, in that investment? And it's an interesting question. If you look
It
at
is.
what's happening in Europe, some very large operators are saying, look, content providers want the eyeballs all the way at the end of the network. I have to build that last mile. I have to service that access, right? I have to provide these SLAs, whereas a content provider has no SLA. It's all best effort. But yet they want to have access to that end user. How do we find a way for the business to work?
Right.
And then it all goes back to what was mentioned before. I mean, you have to create a partnership where it's a win-win, because otherwise something will break, and it's difficult to address.
Right.
So we're in a state of flux. In my
We definitely are, and it's a changing world with the, partnerships mean some kind of deal, and I think that's, we're saying that business case has to be there, that someone makes one and someone uses another, asset, whether it's, local access or, the backbone or the internet, and I think that's part of it. Mark, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think there's no doubt that with all of the things that we've been talking about, the bandwidth is only going to go up, right? Or the amount of bandwidth that we all need in enterprises, for consumers, for games, for whatever, it's just going to continue to go up, and it's going to continue to go up all the time. And so we need to continue to lower the cost or find ways of delivering ever more bandwidth at ever lower cost, which the good news is that's happened over the last decade plus. We need to continue doing that at all layers of the network, whether it's the fiber layer, how you light it, how you provide a routed layer, or how you provide the CDN server content delivery technologies. That just has to keep going up. And then I think the second thing, which is emerging and which SDN or software-defined networks holds out the possibility of, is that there is going to be emerging, whether it's one controlled by the other, I see it more as emerging of the application and the network. They're going to have to be much more intrinsically linked for the efficiencies to continue to be made available to people, and for the performance, the ever-increasing performance that people expect out of those networks, and applications that continue straining in what's possible, right?
So the partnership concept, right, and we see a lot of partnerships being announced on a daily basis, right? Let's face it, we live in an innovator's age, right, where everything is happening faster. The partnerships will help to advance that cause, but only if they're operationalized, making it easier for the end user. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that happens. Rosemary, you mentioned the enterprise sparking up the relationship and having to manage the network, the data center, the applications that's contained within. That doesn't necessarily have to be three separate partnerships that the enterprise or that the consumer is embarking on. Make it generally available to all, and manage the end-to-end relationship so that it accelerates their consumption of those resources. And I'm not just talking about the network, the consumption of the application that they're running, the broadcast domains, the applications, whatever they may be. So those would be the two parting comments that I would embrace here.
Right, and we see that a lot, obviously, with the apps, now that just emerge. They're hot, then they go away. Somebody figures out something better, and it happens again. So,
or even something as simple as a continuity play.
Right.
Organization needs to replicate data in a center, and they need access to that information, right? Replication is only meaningful when you have to access it. So getting that access to it when you need it is critical, and putting that power back to the end user, whether it's content access or an enterprise applications access, the power should be in the end user's hands.